Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Yoon Hae-jung and Chung Hae-in. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys. We're going to start things off with some economic news. According to the central bank data released on this Tuesday, South Korea's economy grew 0.6% in the third quarter of the year on the back of reviving exports and domestic demand. Hae-jung, you're going to start us off. Let's get the latest figures over there.
Right. According to data released by the Bank of Korea, the country's real gross domestic product, a key gauge of economic growth, increased 0.6% on quarter in the July-September period as the semiconductor industry improved and exports have picked up. The third quarter expansion compares with the 0.6% on-quarter expansion in the second quarter of the year and the 0.3% gain in the first quarter. Now, breaking down Q3 growth by sectors, there were increases in most categories except for in facility investment. Private spending rose 0.3% in the third quarter, centered on services such as food, lodging, entertainment, and culture. Government spending also increased 0.2% in the third quarter, and construction investment increased by 2.1%, driven by building and civil construction, while facility investment decreased by 2.2% due to a decrease in machinery. The country's exports climbed 3.4% in the July-September period, led by semiconductors, machinery, and equipment. Now, this is a turnaround from the previous quarter's 0.9% decline. Now, Q3's climb is worthy to note because the country's exports have fell for the 12th consecutive month in September amid the global economic slowdown and aggressive monetary tightening by the U.S. and other major economies to bring down inflation under control. Now, meanwhile, imports increased by 2.3%, led by petroleum products. Now, on a yearly basis, South Korea's economy advanced 1.4% in the third quarter, following a 0.9% growth for both the first and second quarters. So Korea's economy has been on a recovery track since it contracted 0.3% in the fourth quarter last year. Earlier, the Bank of Korea released its revised economic forecast last month, keeping its growth forecast for this year at 1.4%. The central bank predicts that this year's growth will be in line with its estimate of its 1.4% growth, as private spending shows signs of a modest recovery amid recovering exports. And this is down from a 2.6% expansion in 2022 and a 4.3% growth in 2021. Now, in the meantime, the central bank held its key interest rate steady at 3.5% for the seventh straight time last month, as it weighs a slowdown in growth amid moderating inflation. The rate freezes came after the Bank of Korea delivered 7 consecutive rate hikes from April 2022 to January 2023.
Yeah, so the inflation is the interesting thing here because they're saying it's kind of slowing down. It's going up, but it's slowing down is what they're saying. But do we feel that way is the big question. Well, with some good signals of economic growth, you're also going to see naturally consumer prices go up as well. Consumer prices in general rose by more than 3%, and this is actually the fourth consecutive month seeing such trend. The pace of inflation itself slowed for the first time in 4 months after reaching near 4% level. Yain, let's get the details of this.
Sure. So Statistics Korea released the November consumer price trends data this morning, and it revealed that the consumer price index rose by 3.3% from the same month last year, recording 112.74. The index dropped down to the 2% range in June and July of this year, but has now been in the 3% range for 4 months, following 3.4% in August, 3.7% in September, and 3.8% in October. Though the number is again higher than 3% in November, it seems to be putting a brake on the upward trend, falling 0.5 percentage point from October number. So the decrease in petroleum prices by by 5.1% compared to a year ago, has contributed to a 0.25 percentage point decrease in the overall headline inflation rate. Notably, the trends in different petroleum products have shown a contrasting pattern, with gasoline prices rising by 2.4%, while diesel and kerosene prices dropped by 13.1% and 10.4%, respectively. On the other hand, agricultural products experienced a significant increase of 13.6%, acting as a contributing factor to a 0.57 percentage point rise in overall inflation. Now, this marks the highest inflation rate for agricultural products in 2.5 years since May 2021. For utilities such as electricity, gas, and water, there has been a 9.6% increase compared to the previous year, attributed to rising fees. So the highest increase was seen from electricity charges, which rose by 14% from last year. The core consumer prices, excluding agricultural and petroleum products, rose by 3.3% year over year. The Ministry of Economy and Finance highlighted in its press release that when compared to major countries such as the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom, the core inflation level of South Korea remains significantly lower. So the ministry further commented, quote, considering the stability in core inflation and recent trends in international oil prices, it is expected that the trend of price stability will continue in December. However, they cautioned that uncertainties such as winter weather conditions and oil price volatility still remain high.
I mean, sure, the core inflation levels do remain significantly lower than the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom as well, but if you compare it to then by the GDP, right, the money that's been coming in, the GDP for South Korea and the United States, vastly different. GDP between the European Union countries and South Korea, vastly different, much higher over in the EU, also including in the UK as well. So if you compare it by GDP to, I guess, the inflation ratio, South Korea is still very much high. It is the big problem. With the United States, it's sure, inflation is very high, but because the GDP is so much higher, that a lot of people are able to afford it, right, without really feeling the pinch of it. Although, I guess, for the lower income families, they're especially feeling the pinch. But I think that's one of those things that you have to start calculating, because it's a different economy that you're seeing in those places there, including the European Union countries. In the meantime, South Korean and Chinese trade officials have agreed to deepen industrial and supply chain cooperation and speed up negotiations on the second phase of a free trade agreement. Haejung, let's get the latest on this.
Right. Discussions took place on Monday at Beijing during the 5th Joint Committee meeting on South Korea-China Free Trade Agreement. At the meeting, South Korea's Trade Minister An Deok-gun and Wang Shou-wen, China's Vice Minister of Commerce, agreed to establish a bilateral dialogue mechanism on export controls and further activate a hotline for supply chains of major industry items. The two sides reviewed the implementation status on trade in goods, rules of origin and technical trade barriers under the FTA, and discussed ways to improve them. The two countries also agreed to work together to deepen industrial and supply chain cooperation, to promote the implementation of the Korea-China FTA, and accelerate the second phase of FTA negotiations. And according to China's Ministry of Commerce, the two countries' research institutions agreed to conduct joint research on free trade agreement implementation and trade issues. The Commerce Ministry's statement, however, made no mention of South Korea's demands for China's immediate action to address their recent delay of customs procedures for urea exports to Seoul. But Chinese authorities have reportedly expressed their stance to their South Korean counterparts to support supply chain cooperation between the two countries, saying that the recent disruption of urea exports appears to stem from problems with the supply chain of urea solution within the country. as there are growing concerns that Chinese customs blocking urea solution from entering South Korea could potentially prompt another urea crisis like the one Korea experienced 2 years ago. Korean lawmakers have been discussing response measures, and the Chinese side has reportedly responded that they would try to find an amicable solution.
So the whole urea export curve is very weird. Okay, so this is what it is. They're citing supply issues, right? They're trying to garner much of the supply for domestic use, is what they're saying. But production for urea has actually jumped up quite a bit. If you look at production numbers for urea, I believe for October, it's up like 9-point-something% from the same period last year. That means they have more. They're producing more urea than they have last year. But what's happening right now is that they're also they've ramped up the number of imports of urea. They're selling a lot of these urea solutions to different countries, and India marks the biggest buyers of urea from China, where they have like something like 70-something% of all urea that they purchase is from China. And so you look at 2 years ago when there was a urea crisis, even though number of countries like Australia wasn't able to get it, South Korea, by the way, has like less than 10% of urea imports coming from China. South Korea was not able to get it. They kept on supplying to India because they had basically, one of those like VIP customer kind of service kind of a thing. And so because there's so much volatility in the raw material prices because of the Ukraine war and because of the armed conflict over in the Middle East, they're realizing maybe something that happened 2 years ago could happen, whereas they have to keep up the quota for the exports, because India buys so much. And so if they're going to send off all that much and India is going to continue to buy these urea, they still need more for themselves. And they're saying that a lot of experts are saying this is why there's an export curve right now, just in case something that happened 2 years ago happens again. They want to prevent it. But in the meantime, they're still going to continue to provide India with that much urea. We'll see what happens, because this could be a big issue. South Korean government did say that they have enough urea in supply for about 3 months, is what they said. Switching gears, Russian President Vladimir Putin stating yesterday that whether the cooperation between Russia and South Korea will return to a partnership that benefits the citizens of both countries depends on South Korea. Yane, let's get more.
Sure. So according to the Kremlin, President Putin, speaking at the credential ceremony for ambassadors from 21 countries held in Moscow on the same day, emphasized that Russia is ready for this. So he expressed regret, saying, quote, "Unfortunately, the relationship between Korea and Russia is going through a challenging period," and added that just a few years ago, the relationship was developing in a constructive manner, particularly in the economic sphere, proving mutually beneficial. He continued on to mention the two countries' cooperation for the political and diplomatic resolution of the situation on the Korean Peninsula. Now, on the same day, Ambassador Lee Do-hun, the newly appointed South Korean ambassador to Russia, presented his credentials to President Putin. Now, the credential presentation is a procedure where the head of state of the country sending an ambassador bestows the person with the letters of credence, which is then delivered to the head of the state, the person is appointed to. Now, on this very same day, President Putin received credentials from ambassadors of a total of 21 countries, including South Korea, the United Kingdom, and Germany, countries which were designated as unfriendly in response to the conflict in Ukraine for imposing sanctions against Russia. Addressing the British ambassador, Putin expressed his hope for the situation to change for the better for the benefit of the citizens of both countries. And to the German ambassador, he emphasized how discontinuing cooperation is not beneficial for either country, and building a relationship based on principles of equality, mutual benefit, and respect is crucial not only for the two nations but for entire Europe. President Putin stated, quote, "Russia can enter into constructive partnerships with all countries, and we do not accept confrontations among blocs or actions that violate the UN Charter," emphasizing we are neither partial nor hostile to anyone.
Well, I mean, Russia has to still understand that of all the countries, South Korea is still trying to kind of, they're not meeting in the middle. All right, they're definitely siding with Ukraine. They're definitely siding with the U.S. They're definitely siding with the Western countries out there. But one of the things that they still kept, refraining from doing is assisting Ukraine with offensive, lethal weapons is what it is, right? They're only assisting them with non-lethal weapons, defensive kits and so forth, and humanitarian aid. But although there was reports that came out that South Korea has indirectly supplied more ammunition to Ukraine than all the European countries together. And so, that's one of those things that Russia is going to be kind of upset about. In the meantime, the U.S. State Department said Monday that South Korea is not subject of UN Security Council sanctions. This is because North Korea accused the U.S. of having double standards over space programs. We knew this was going to happen. Haejang, let's get more on this.
Right. Last month, the North launched a space rocket to put a military spy satellite into orbit, drawing international criticism that it violated multiple UN Security Council resolutions, banning any launch using ballistic missile technology. And South Korea also launched a military reconnaissance satellite from a U.S. military base last week and conducted a test flight of a solid fuel rocket in waters south of the country's island of Jeju, but its launches were seen as legitimate security efforts. So a spokesperson at North Korea's National Aerospace Technology Administration claimed Monday that the U.S. has a double standard over South Korea's spy satellite as it brazenly helped Seoul's launch while condemning the North's exercise of its sovereign right. But U.S. Department of State spokesperson Matthew Miller responded to such remarks on the same day, stating that South Korea is not the subject of multiple UN Security Council resolutions, unlike North Korea for its dangerous and destabilizing activities in the region. The spokesperson said North Korea's pursuit of WMDs and ballistic missile capabilities, including the use of a space launch vehicle to orbit a satellite, violates multiple UN Security Council resolutions, and said that it is not the case with the South Korean satellite launch, which is an important distinction. He also pointed out that North Korea's failure to adhere to the September 19th Inter-Korean Military Agreement has posed challenges to South Korea's security as well. Meanwhile, Miller also reiterated Washington's willingness to engage in dialogue with Pyongyang, saying that the State Department has made clear from the outset of this administration and that they would welcome dialogue with North Korea and a peaceful resolution to concerns over its destabilizing activities, adding that Washington's ties with South Korea remains ironclad.
You know that North Korea has faced a number of sanctions, international sanctions, domestic sanctions from unilateral sanctions from South Korea, the U.S., and you can name a whole list of countries, not to mention UN Security Council resolutions. But, excuse me, there's always a loophole, right? And one of the loopholes that they're using are hacking groups. We talked about the Lazarus group. We talked about Kim Soo-ki, right? Now there's another. On Monday, the police reporting that in Daryl, a hacking group from North Korea, has not only stolen crucial digital data with key technologies from South Korean defense companies, but also sent back some of the money they obtained through ransomware attacks on other firms. Yain, let's get the latest on this.
Of course. So the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency, in collaboration with the U.S. FBI, has uncovered a cyber attack orchestrated by the North Korean hacking organization called Enderio. Now, Enderio is known to be controlled by North Korea's primary intelligence bureau, the Reconnaissance General Bureau, and it utilized a South Korean server lender to access the websites of South Korean firms and institutions, whopping 83 times between December last year and March. So the hacking group successfully infiltrated websites belonging to numerous South Korean entities, including an IT service affiliate of a conglomerate, research centers, universities, defense firms, and financial institutions, which are specializing in high-level science and technologies. As a result of these cyber attacks, significant digital data, including information on key defense technologies like laser-based air defense weapons and personal information of website users, were compromised. The leaked data reportedly amounts to a substantial 1.2 terabytes. And Daryl is also implicated in ransomware attacks on 3 South Korean firms, allegedly pocketing 470 million won, and that's approximately $360 million. So, and that worth of cryptocurrency. Now, some of the obtained ransoms are believed to have been sent back to North Korea, and police investigations, including tracking transactions on virtual asset exchanges, revealed that approximately 110 million won was transferred to a Chinese bank through a financial account of a female foreigner. Authorities suspect that these funds were eventually funneled to North Korea, prompting an examination of the woman's financial and mobile communication records to ascertain her involvement in potential money laundering activities. Now, against this backdrop, the People Power Party urged the Democratic Party to swiftly enacts the cybersecurity basic law. It is currently pending in the National Assembly, and the party cites the escalating cyber threat from North Korea. The cybersecurity basic law, proposed by People Power Party Congressman Jo Tae-yong in June 2020, includes provisions for establishing the National Cybersecurity Policy Coordination Council, chaired by the President, and forming the National Cybersecurity Center under the head of the National Intelligence Service.
Yane, very quickly, I know this is random, but haven't you heard of Endario before? Does Endario strike you as a certain character?
Very familiar name,
yes.
actually.
Diablo 2, Act 1 boss. Name is Endario. That's the first thing that popped up in my hand. We used to go Andy run all the time. Let's move on to domestic politics this time. Cabinet reshuffle. We talked about this, right? Monday, 6 ministers being replaced, nominated by President Yoon. Well, another reshuffle is likely to take place because we have Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon, was considered a strong contender for Parliament. There's even talks about who would be next in line for the People Power Party to run in the next presidential election. They're saying Han Dong-hoon is probably a strong contender for the next presidential election as well, which is why it's not surprising that he might be running for Parliament come next April's general elections. You also have Korea Communications Commission Chief Lee Dong-wan, who resigned. They need to find a replacement for that. Of course, Haejung, let's get the latest. Another cabinet reshuffle. We're looking at a huge shakeup from the Yoon administration.
Right. As we've mentioned, President Yoon Suk-yeol carried out a partial cabinet reshuffle on Monday, replacing 6 cabinet ministers. And President Yoon is expected to make further reshuffles, possibly as early as later this week. And there is speculation that Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon could be included in the so-called one-point reshuffle, 1 point referring to a temporary arrangement to address an important agenda. And this reshuffle is expected to take place at the end of the year or at the beginning of 2024. Meanwhile, what these 6 outgoing ministers of the reshuffle have in common is that they are likely to run in next year's general elections. Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport Won Il-yong, regardless of his constituency, will support the ruling party, while Deputy Prime Minister Chu Kyung-ho is running for a 3rd term in Daegu, while Veterans Affairs Minister Bang Min-sik is leaning to run for Seongnam's Bundang district. SMEs and Startups Minister Lee Young is reportedly targeting Seoul's Seocho district, and Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs Minister Chung Wang-gun is targeting Chungnam's city of Cheonan, and Oceans and Fisheries Minister Cho Seung-hwan is aiming for Busan's district of Yeongdo and Chunggu. And as mentioned, President Yoon is expected to make further reshuffles as early as later this week. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Park Jin, who was almost certain to be retained, is likely to be replaced after failing to become the host for the 2030 World Expo, while the Ministry of Employment and Labor, as well as the Ministry of Science and ICT, are also expected to go through some leadership changes. National Security Advisor Jo Tae-yong is expected to replace the National Intelligence Service chief who was dismissed, and Kim Hong-il, a former prosecutor having been in office for only 5 months, is expected to replace former Korea Communications Commissioner Lee Dong-hwan. Now, in the meantime, today, President Yoon Suk-yeol had a private luncheon with the leadership of the People Power Party. The party's top 4 leaders were present, including PPP chief Kim Ki-yeon and representatives Yoon Jae-ok, Yoon Ui-dong, and Lee Man-hee, as well as new advisors for the presidential office after its reshuffle.
Again, we'll keep a close tab on the reshuffling and, of course, for all the former ministers. If you look at the areas, the contingencies that they're running, they're areas where it's, usually a PPP stronghold. So likely that they'll win the elections in those areas. Amidst the prolonged vacancy in the leadership role of the Supreme Court, confirmation hearing for the nominee for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that began today. We're talking about Cho Hee-dae. In his written response, identified trial delays as the most pressing issues regarding the abolition of the death penalty, expressed his view that it is not timely at the moment. Yane, let's get more on his first day of confirmation hearing.
Sure. So the nominee for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Cho Hee-dae, has provided his personal stances on various judicial issues through a 800-plus pages written response to the National Assembly's confirmation hearing. So he primarily identified trial delays as the most serious issue currently affecting the judiciary. And Joe emphasized that the shortage of judges is the fundamental cause, saying an environment where the courts can handle cases more efficiently must be in place. Now, to address this, he suggested considering the establishment of specialized courts, expanding the number of specialized judges, and reviewing the specialization of first instance trials to minimize delays caused by personnel transfers. However, he approached controversial topics with caution, such as the revival of the Chief Justices in the High Court and the recommendation system for Chief Justice nominees. Regarding the pre-warrant hearings for search and seizure warrants, he expressed positive opinions, stating there is no theoretical reason why the courts should not appropriately control extensive searches of electronic information. On the issue of the death penalty, he explained that its abolition is still premature, citing public sentiment and what it practically represents. He stressed that decisions regarding its abolition should be made cautiously based on societal consensus. Addressing recent developments related to the perjury case involving the Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung, Joe stated that if the procedures were carried out according to the regulations, it would be difficult to deem the process problematic. Furthermore, when questioned about the impeachment of judges or prosecutors, he emphasized a careful approach, stating that indiscriminate attempts of impeachment of judges may risk undermining the independence of the judiciary.
Yeah, so this confirmation hearing is going to be quite interesting because he's, again, out of all the confirmation hearings, this is the one with the least controversies. Like we've seen controversies surrounding the former KCC chief. We've had controversies over different ministers' confirmation. He doesn't have any controversies, but the only issue I think that's also going to pop up is the fact that his age, right? So he's 66. He's going to turn 67. In 3 years, because a Supreme Court Chief Justice can only hold on to his or her position, until the age of 70. Mm-hmm. And so he's not going to be able to fill out his full term as the Chief Justice. And so that might be one of them. But again, this is a 2-day confirmation hearing. We'll see what kind of other questions and answers we get in regards to this tomorrow. In the meantime, Korea's Children's Hospital Association issued a statement on Tuesday calling for measures to be taken against the mycoplasma outbreak that's spreading in China, pointing out that South Korean health authorities are not taking sufficient measures to prepare for the virus. We know what happened last time this happened. We don't want another one spreading like wildfire here. Haejang, let's get the latest.
The Korea Children's Hospital Association said pediatric infectious diseases are characterized by a rapid spread of epidemics if the response measures are poor in the initial stages of the spread, and added that while hospitals and clinics are walking on eggshells every day, the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency is simply recommending increasing the level of personal protection for mycoplasma because it's not a new pathogen and because they consider it as an illness that can be treated at a domestic level. And according to the Children's Hospital Association, countries such as India and Taiwan are advising people not to travel to China and taking measures to prevent the virus from entering their countries. But the South Korean government is remaining rather complacent because it's not an epidemic just yet. Now, the mycoplasma infectious disease is an acute respiratory infection caused by the mycoplasma pneumonia bacterium and occurs every 3 to 4 years in Korea. And recently, the epidemic has spread across China, mainly among children, and pediatric hospitals in major cities have reportedly been overwhelmed with these mycoplasma patients. Now, in South Korea, the 2019 outbreak hospitalized around 13,500 people. According to Korea's Disease Control and Prevention Agency, the number of hospitalizations for mycoplasma up until the end of November this year is 270, which is less than half of the 554 patients in the same period back in 2019, which is why they seem to be less alert. Now, typical symptoms of mycoplasma include fever, cough, bronchitis, sore throat, headache, and fatigue, which lasts about 3 weeks. And this is different from the regular cold, where symptoms usually last about a week. And a common result of mycoplasma infection is pneumonia. Now, mycoplasma is spread through respiratory droplets of infected people when they cough or sneeze. So, of course, it is advised to avoid direct contact, and it's more easily spread in households where families live together or in child care centers and dormitories where there are large groups of people. So it is recommended that people with respiratory symptoms stay home from work or school and rest.
I'm deeply concerned right now.
3 weeks?
Yeah. I think it's the amount of time you've been,
It's been 3 weeks. It's really been 3 weeks. My kid has it too.
Oh my God.
Oh no.
And he's now had it for, a week and a half now. I've never been, I don't feel ill, right? Mm-hmm. I have this lingering cough that won't go away. No matter what I do, I've taken I've taken 3 different antibiotics now. The doctor's changing different things. And she's prescribed me with something new. She said, something new is going around. Maybe that could be it. So maybe take these antibiotics. She might have been talking about this. I don't know. But even right now, it's not working. And I apologize for all of our listeners out there. I might be coughing here and there. I'm going to try to suppress it as much as possible, but it is tough. But as respiratory illnesses like mycoplasma pneumonia is rapidly spreading in China, it's also been reported by Radio Free Asia just on Monday local time that in some regions the health code symbolizing 3 years of zero COVID has reappeared again. Yane, tell us more about this.
Sure. So it was on the December 1st when a Chinese newspaper cited social media posts revealing that some of the local governments of Sichuan and Guangdong provinces have resurrected the so-called health code, which hasn't been in use since December last year. So the article included screen captures of Green Health Code's app shared by Chinese internet users. As a sudden move on last December 7th, China announced the lifting of mandatory Green Health QR code verifications, declaring an end to the fight for pandemic, and the health code, known in Chinese as Jiankangbao or Jiankangma, refers to a smartphone application where an individual's COVID-19 related information, including their PCR test results, vaccination status, and travel history, is collected and stored. Now, during China's implementation of the zero COVID policy, the health code became an essential entry permit in Chinese society. Individuals were required to scan the health code at the entrance using a QR code at all public places, companies, and public transportation, and residents from COVID-19 risk areas or those with a history of visiting such areas were marked in red or yellow, indicating restrictions on their movement. The very article was searchable on the internet on the 4th, but notably, it disappeared from the media outlet's own website. Now, Guangzhou authorities asserted that there has been no discontinuation of any functions of the health code app, although they confirmed that the feature restricting individual travel had already been discontinued and has not been reinstated. Regarding this, Radio Free Asia pointed out that the Chinese authorities are censoring articles related to the alleged resurrection of the health code amidst the spread of respiratory diseases in China, and they emphasize that such articles reflect public concerns about the possible return of COVID-19 prevention policies.
I mean, there's things you can censor, but when it comes to health stuff, please don't. And you know what? Another thing that we've been saying, I think because we've been so used to what we dealt with during the COVID-19 pandemic, right, era, that I'm already seeing, like, when my kid goes to daycare center, and with daycare, they catch everything. They bring everything from the daycare center. That's probably how I got in the first place, right? And so now they're all masking up. I'm starting to mask up again, only to, I don't feel ill or anything. I have this, it's like an itchy, someone's
Tickling your throat.
Tickling my throat.
Yes.
And I'm trying to suppress it. I'm trying to stop. And then, the more I try not to, it sounds weird. But again, this is the reason why I have my face mask on, again, to protect my colleagues from spreading. But I think I've also been seeing, especially during this winter, a lot of people getting sick and a lot of people back wearing their face masks, especially when they're using the public transport. So anyways, guys, thank you very much for coming in today. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.